Imagine you're on a routine flight, about 30,000 feet above sea level, when suddenly a masked man rises from his seat and points a gun at you. Within moments, 5 men seize control of the plane, and you are all left helpless. This is not an ordinary flight. This is the story of Indian Airlines Flight IC814, a hijacking that would plunge an entire nation into a week-long crisis, push diplomatic boundaries, and change the lives of those on board. It's December 24th, 1999. At Tribhuvan International Airport in Kathmandu, Nepal, Indian Airlines Flight IC814, an Airbus A300, is on the tarmac, preparing for a short journey to New Delhi, India. In the cockpit is 37-year-old Captain Devi Sharan, joined by First Officer Rajinder Kumar and Flight Engineer Anil Kumar Jagia. Inside the terminal, passengers line up for security checks. Among them are 5 men, each carrying a small bag. The mood is light, it's the holiday season, and for many on board, it's just a regular flight home before the new year. It's just 45 minutes after takeoff. The passengers are settling into the flight. The seatbelt signs have been turned off, and the flight attendants begin preparing refreshments. But then, everything changes. A man in business class pulls on a ski mask and rises from his seat. He grabs senior flight attendant Anil Sharma, his voice low and commanding. "Do as I say, or everyone on this plane pays the price." This man claims to have a bomb. In the back of the plane, 4 other men do the same, each one brandishing a weapon and making their way down the aisle. Within seconds, the atmosphere transforms from calm to chaos. Frightened passengers glance around, trying to understand what's happening, but it's clear. These 5 men are in control now. They call each other by code names: Chief, Doctor, Burger, Shankar, and Bowler. The chief, who is the leader of the group, moves toward the cockpit, demanding that Captain Sharan change direction and head west. His destination? Lahore, Pakistan. At gunpoint, he tells the captain, "Do what I say, or I'll kill a passenger." But Captain Sharan knows the stakes are very high and tries to buy time. He tells the chief that the plane doesn't have enough fuel to reach Lahore, hoping to keep the flight within Indian borders for as long as possible. However, the chief isn't swayed. He's done his homework. He knows the plane's fuel capacity and sees right through the captain's attempt to delay. Similarly, inside the cabin, the hijackers force passengers to blindfold themselves, isolating each one into a terrifying personal darkness. Male passengers are made to sit at the front, while women and children are moved toward the rear of the aircraft. Under the control of the hijackers, Flight IC814 now approaches Indian airspace, and Captain Sharan tries to keep the aircraft within Indian borders. He slows the plane's speed, hoping that help or instructions from the ground will come soon. But minutes passed, and there was still no response from Indian authorities. As the plane nears Amritsar, the captain reaches out to Amritsar Air Traffic Control, informing them of the hijacking and requesting permission to land. Amritsar ATC, however, is not prepared for a situation like this. They don't have specific training or protocols for a hijacking, nor has the Crisis Management Group, CMG, in Delhi issued instructions on how to proceed. Meanwhile, inside the plane, the hijackers are growing impatient. They repeatedly tell Captain Sharan that they will kill passengers if the plane doesn't leave Indian airspace. They can't understand why it's taking so long to arrange for fuel. Finally, Amritsar's crisis team receives instructions from Delhi: delay refueling to buy time for the Indian commandos to reach Amritsar. But there's a problem. The commandos are still in Delhi, and no one has arranged for their immediate departure. The situation in Amritsar takes an unfortunate turn when a fuel truck, meant to approach the plane and block its movement, abruptly stops far from the aircraft. The sudden halt raises suspicion among the hijackers, who now believe Indian authorities are planning an attack. Fearing for their lives, the hijackers order Captain Sharan to take off immediately. At this point, there's almost no fuel left, but Captain Sharan has no choice. The plane lifts off from Indian soil, and with it, India loses a critical chance to end the hijacking. With fuel critically low, Flight IC814 now heads west, crossing into Pakistani airspace. But instead of a safe harbor, the crew faces an immediate refusal. Lahore's air traffic control denies them permission to land and takes even stronger measures. The entire Lahore airspace is shut down. Runway lights are switched off, and all navigation aids go dark, effectively leaving the plane blind over foreign territory. Captain Sharan makes another desperate request for landing permission, explaining that they're almost out of fuel. Pakistani authorities issue a stark warning, suggesting that any attempt to land will be met with force. But with no other options, Captain Sharan continues to fly into Pakistani airspace, hoping to find some way to keep the passengers safe. Through a stroke of luck, he spots a line of lights ahead, which he assumes is a runway, but as the plane descends, the outlines of cars, trucks, and people on a highway becomes visible. They are moments away from disaster, prepared to land on a busy road in Lahore. Fearing a crisis in their own territory, Pakistan finally relents, turning on the runway lights and allowing IC814 to land. The plane touches down in Lahore, surrounded almost immediately by Pakistani commandos. Tense negotiations follow as the hijackers demand fuel to continue their journey. Captain Sharan requests that women and injured passengers be allowed to disembark, but Pakistani authorities refuse, saying they want nothing to do with the hijacking beyond refueling. Within hours, the plane is airborne again, heading into the dark skies with only the hijackers' plans guiding its course. Denied entry by Pakistan, the hijackers decide to redirect the plane once more. Kabul, Afghanistan is their intended destination, but it has no night landing facilities. Instead, the plane heads south towards Oman, but Oman too refuses them entry. Finally, they turn toward the UAE, hoping to find a safe harbor there. In the early hours of the morning, the plane lands at Dubai's Al Minhad Air Force Base. Here, a brief negotiation allows for the release of some passengers in exchange for fuel, and the body of Rupin Katyal, who was killed by the hijackers, is taken off the plane. His wife, Rachna, still on board, remains unaware of her husband's fate. The rest of the passengers remained under the hijackers' control as the plane lifted off into the night once more, this time bound for Kandahar, Afghanistan. After a night of tense travel and denied entries, IC814 finally lands in Kandahar, Afghanistan, where the Taliban government controls the airport. For the next 5 days, the passengers and crew will remain trapped on the tarmac, under the watch of the hijackers and Taliban forces. Conditions on board worsened as food supplies reduced drastically, sanitation facilities became unusable, and the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. Outside, Taliban fighters surround the plane, reportedly as protection, but Indian officials fear the Taliban is actively supporting the hijackers. In Delhi, the Indian government mobilizes a team of negotiators, which includes national security advisors, intelligence officials, and diplomats. Jaswant Singh, India's external affairs minister, is tasked with leading the efforts to secure the hostages' release. But even as India's team arrives in Kandahar, they are met with a stark reality. The Taliban refuses to let Indian commandos anywhere near the plane, shutting down any hope of a tactical rescue. With the Taliban surrounding the aircraft, India's team has no choice but to pursue negotiations. The hijackers present their demands. They want the release of 3 militants held in Indian prisons: Maulana Masood Azhar, Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh, and Mustaq Ahmed Sargar. Each of these men has a history of militant activities, and their release poses a long-term security risk for India. But with no viable military option and the lives of 155 hostages at stake, Indian officials face a really tough decision. Back home, families of the hostages gather, pleading for their loved ones' safe return, while opposition voices criticize the government's handling of the crisis. In the end, India agrees to the hijackers' demands. The 3 prisoners were brought to Delhi, where Jaswant Singh himself accompanied them on the flight to Kandahar. On December 31st, 1999, after nearly a week in captivity, the hostages were finally freed. But just as the hijackers had planned, they escape alongside the Taliban, crossing the Afghan border into Pakistan, where they disappear from sight. For the passengers of IC814, the ordeal is over. But for India, the crisis has left deep and lasting scars. The hostages return home, greeted with relief and celebration. But the events of IC814 leave a complex legacy that will continue to shape India's security landscape for years to come. The 3 militants released in exchange for the passengers eventually played pivotal roles in some of the most devastating terrorist attacks on Indian and Western targets. Maulana Masood Azhar, in particular, soon found the militant group Jaish-e-Mohammed, which orchestrates several high-profile attacks, including the 2001 assault on the Indian Parliament and the 2019 Pulwama attack. His group has become one of the largest and most dangerous terrorists operating in the region, fueling violence in Kashmir and beyond. Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh, after his release, was involved in the kidnapping and murder of Wall Street Journal journalist Daniel Pearl and reportedly played an important role in the planning of the 9/11 attacks in United States. Zargar, too, continued militant operations, focusing on recruiting and training fighters to carry out cross-border attacks. For India, the hijacking serves as a reminder of the delicate balance between diplomacy and national security. The government's difficult decision to negotiate with the hijackers, driven by intense public pressure and a lack of actionable alternatives, draws both domestic and international criticism. The incident exposes gaps in India's crisis management protocols, leading to changes in security policy and aviation regulations to prevent such crises in the future. And to this day, the December 24th, 1999 hijack remains the longest hijacking and one of the darkest chapters in Indian aviation history. So, what do you think? Was the decision to release the militants justified? Or was there another way the Indian authorities could have explored? We'd love to know your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you found this story interesting, please don't hesitate to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you will be among the first to know when we publish next. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.